Anyway, good evening. Thank you for being here. I hope you can hear us for the success of the fair, which has been noisy. We had the chance to be here with Alfredo Jaar, who seldom is around here in France, though actually he also is French, not only being from Chilean origins, living in New York by choice, um, and after having to leave Chile by force, but we will probably explain this in due time. And Alfredo, like many other artists, like Sofika, like Wisław Olkowski, like Leon Ferrari, and many others, uses photography as one of his many tools. You would not say he's a photographer. Probably you will define this better later, whether he's an artist, being trained as an architect. Maybe it's a bit of all this, actually, and the work will speak for itself. Anyway, it's very new that Alfredo appears in this kind of territory of photography. I remember when I went to see him in Berlin, was it? Where he was having a beautiful retrospective, and he never had one in France. I saw works here and there in Tokyo and other places, but never had a full perspective. I went to see him in the name of the Art Photo Festival, and Alfredo was very surprised. He said, "How come photography comes to me?" I said, "Well, folks should look at your work. It's full of photographies."
It's full of photographs, but the question of relationship to photography is even at the heart of many of your production. So we will go into all this, but to get there, there's a starting point, which is very important in the life as an artist of Alfredo, and it has to do very much with photography, and you actually can see that starting point on the booth of Goodman Gallery, where you see the very first work of Alfredo, and I'd like him to show us some samples of the scene and explain why this is his entry into the art world.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah? Can you hear me now? No?
Parle très près, faut que tu manges le micro.
Il faut le toucher presque, non?
Comme ça.
D'accord.
Like Johnny Hallyday.
Okay. Thank you for coming. I moved to New York in 1982. And I wanted to be an artist, but I was an architect. And I didn't know how to act in the art world. So I decided to work as an architect for a few years and to finance myself as an artist thanks to architecture. And so during a few years, I worked as an architect during the day, and in the evenings and on weekends, I was starting to think as an artist. But for architects, context is everything. So I needed to understand the context of the art world in New York in order to become an artist. So during those years that I was an architect, I went to every exhibition, every gallery, every museum. I subscribed to every publication. I went to every lecture. I needed to understand how the art world functions before becoming an artist. And after a few years, I came up with two conclusions. One, New York at the time was the center of the art world. Not anymore, but at the time, it was definitely the center of the art world. Extraordinary.
Can you precise when the time is?
It's the 80s, between 82 and 85. And so extraordinary exhibition, extraordinary artists, extraordinary publications, extraordinary conversation, extraordinary collections and institutions, etc. But the second conclusion I came up with was the art world is extremely provincial. Because when you looked at the art world and you look at what the artists were doing, they were looking at themselves, and the world did not exist. At the time, there were 37 conflicts around the world, but you would go to a gallery and a museum, and you couldn't see any of that. So that's when I thought, now I know how I'm going to act in this art world. I'm going to be an artist, but I want to bring the world to the art world, the real world to the art world. It was a very ambitious project, utopian project, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring reality into the art world and not let the art world just be a world of fiction. So, by chance, at that time, I saw a little article in a French paper, 6 lines, talking about Serra Pelada in the eastern part of the Amazon in Brazil. There was no photography, just a description, and they said it's a pit done by hands, there are no machines, and that it looks like hell because there are 100,000 men looking for gold. So at that moment I thought, this is a good place to start. And I went there.
Which year was that?
This is 1984. So I'm going to show you...
May I say this is a couple of years before Sebastião Salgado?
Yes. So I went there, and I'm going to show you the same images you have seen at Goodman Gallery. So I took some 3,000 pictures, and I spent 2 weeks there sleeping in a miner's home, and I wanted to document everything. I wanted to show everything that was happening in the mine. Je ne sais pas pourquoi c'est... Ça fait rien.
So far, this looks like a photographer's attitude, going to Kreiser's site. What happened then?
Yeah. So, once I came back to New York with these images, I asked myself, how I'm going to show these images? How can I explain the context of these images? So I came up with an idea. I rented a subway station called Spring Street Subway Station in Soho. This is the entrance. This is the golden year of graffiti in New York. So this is what the train station looked like. And Spring Street is a station in Soho, which was the center of the art world at that time. And this was a station that took you to Wall Street, where people were buying and selling gold and commodities. So I thought, I'm going to display them here. I want to show the people working in Wall Street with abstract numbers what the reality is. So it was mostly advertising of liquor or cigarette, of tobacco. So I rented the entire space, and this is what it looks like. Every 7 or 10 segments, I had the price of the gold in different important cities where gold was being sold. So I wanted to show what the labor was and what was the price at the time.
In terms of street action with photography, this is very early. I mean, can you think about other example of photography coming down into the street before that? I don't think there's been much. Since we had Jaar, we had many other actions in all sorts of countries, but this was quite early, no?
I don't know. I think so. At the time, it was a time of graffiti, and Keith Haring was very well known, and he was drawing on the subway.
I think you even feared that people would graph on your pictures, right?
Yes, we produced 3 sets of prints because we expected graffiti to go all over the posters, but miraculously no one touched them. So we never had to use the other 2 sets. So it was a beautiful sign of respect because, in fact, there were 2 schools near the Spring Street subway station, so every morning and afternoon it was full of kids going to school, and we thought really they would be full of graffiti. They didn't touch them.
How long did this stay up?
It stayed 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a number. What was the New York transportation, easy to convince that they could leave you the space? And actually, advertising space, it's usually pretty expensive.
Well, I had received a grant to do this, and so we paid with the grant, and they were happy to do it. And
you got the top rate.
And this was anonymous. There was no name. My name was nowhere to be found. And so people who wanted to contact me or leave me a message, they used the token booth where you sell the tokens to go into the subway station. He became my post office. So every day I went to check on the work, and he had some mail for me. People wanted to contact me and send me messages. It was very beautiful.
What was the reaction of the milieu, of the critics? Did you get any articles or review?
We didn't get any press of any kind. Only one TV channel went and did a very short story about it.
But did you do any PR around it so people would know about it?
No. So these are the images of the subway installation. And so after that, I did a series of works with these images. And I wanted to get close, to tell about the reality. But because it was a tragic reality, I also wanted to show the other side. I didn't want to just convey a negative idea about this place. So it was more about informing people. So for example, here, you see a miner that is covered in gold coming up, and another that just took a shower, so you can see the color of his skin coming down. Or here, I wanted to be close. I wanted to convey the work, the movement. So here you have 2 miners coming up, slightly out of focus, and one miner going up with 50 pounds of dirt on his shoulders. And you can see the traces on his back. And I took a lot of portraits. I wanted them to show how they are. And they were happy to be photographed. It was the first time a photographer, an artist, had gone to the mine. So I was distributing Polaroid photographs to them, and in exchange, I was taking slides. So I wanted to show how strong and proud they were, and they wanted to send a message to their families. So this is the work that's here.
Why, I mean, as we can consider photographers to be artists, I think we can agree on that ground. Why did you not consider yourself as a photographer, and did you not go to magazines to try to put this work around to a very large audience as well? Why did you choose to be in this kind of intervention on the subway?
Because of the respect for the context. I felt that if I start publishing them, I would lose context. And they can circulate without the right information. So it was very important for me to show them within the context of an installation where I can explain the meaning of these images. But I never really considered myself a photographer. I had a very little camera, and I took 3,000 not because there were 3,000 images, it's because I was hoping that among 3,000 there would be one or two good ones. That was the logic of taking...
So what is now on the fair here are big boxes, light boxes,
Yeah.
which is very different from what you did in the subway. So what is this option?
I started using light boxes in 1979 in Chile. And the idea was that at the time, light boxes were like very modern, very contemporary, and they were used in airports, in malls, in big stores, and they were used for advertising. And one day I thought, they're trying to sell us objects. What if I replace the objects they're trying to sell us by the people who actually makes these objects, to make a kind of homage to the working class? So that was the idea to start. And I wanted also to recuperate the energy of the photograph, because I felt photograph become flat. Life has disappeared. So with the light coming from within, I was hoping that the image becomes stronger. That was my hope.
So your relationship with photography started there, and your art started there at large. But it's not an easy relationship, because many of your works are then not using photography to show something, but you are really questioning photography. Maybe we can move to what is on the other booth here at Jean Cantagotier, where you say bye-bye photography. So we go from full photography to bye-bye photography. You have to explain yourself.
Yes, I will. So this is another portrait. As you can see, they are strong, they are proud, they are looking at you, they are smoking. This is what I wanted to convey to the audience. That was my objective.
You're not answering my question.
Yeah, no, sorry. I'm moving on. So this was 84, 85, 86, 87. And digital photography was starting. And I resisted changing my little slide camera, slide and black and white film camera, for a digital camera. I resisted a few years, but in 1988, I thought, I'd like to try this new thing. So in 88, I purchased myself a digital camera. And when I did that, I was excited because of this new media, but some kind of sadness invaded me, because I thought photography as I knew it was finished. The dark room where I printed my prints is gone. So a kind of photography was disappearing with digital. That's what I thought. And I thought about doing this work as a kind of goodbye to photography. So I call this work Bye-Bye Photography, and it's just a red light bulb, which is a symbol of the dark room. So a simple object that gives the red light with which you can develop films and prints. I thought this is a way to say farewell to photography. So this is installed recently in another exhibition in Paris.
Yes, it was at the off-screen
Yes.
event at the Hotel Salomon Rothschild by your other gallery, Jean Cantagotier. It was a beautiful installation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But this was not a title coming from nowhere. It was really making a reference to one of the most extraordinary books on photography ever done. And it's called Bye-Bye Photography by Daido Moriyama, which is this book from the 70s.
As you can read.
So by quoting Daido Moriyama, I wanted to make an homage to him. and using his title of that book for my piece. And so this is a view of
Whoa.
sorry.
Wait there. No, put it up. But I mean, it's important to say that here is a turn in your art. When the events happen, the terrible events happen in Rwanda, you suddenly, you had done many things in the meantime that were not necessarily using photography. We're not here developing all what you've been doing, but there's a book, there's many ways to go on your site and find all what you've been doing as pieces of art, installations, monumental installations as well, like this memory hall in Santiago and other things. But anyway, the Rwanda has been really a turning point where everything that you are meets together. In other words, there's architecture, use of the space, there's words, intellectual approach of things, there's photography, and there is light. And Rwanda for you has been a source of a lot of studies, a lot of very different studies, which are utterly interesting and that created a lot of pieces, probably to remember. Can you please explain the global process of relationship to Rwanda events, and then maybe come into example like the one which is on the booth here?
So, without knowing, what I did in Serra Pelada, Brazil, to go in situ and investigate and research and bring the images back became the model of what I became. I started doing the same thing with other places around the world.
So Rwanda, excuse me, but Rwanda is more or less 12 years after Serra Pelada, right?
It's 94. Yeah, it's 10
12 years after.
10. So I started following the events on Rwanda from the news, and I realized that 1 million people were being killed in the face of the criminal indifference of the rest of the world. Nobody cared. Nobody did anything to stop the genocide. It was the third genocide of our century. And so in July 94, by the end of the genocide, I had this crazy idea that I have to go to Rwanda to see by myself what was happening there and to witness the end of the genocide and to express my solidarity with the people of Rwanda. So I went and I spent 3 weeks. I took thousands of photographs with a little camera. Journalists that were there, they had lenses that were like 1/2 meter long, zoom lenses, and they had 3 cameras hanging from their shoulders. And I had a very ridiculous little camera. And they were thinking, who is this guy? What is he doing with that little thing? Because I'm not a photographer. I wanted to spend time with the people, to talk to them, to record their voices. And of course, I wanted to take some pictures to remind myself what it was. But I was not there as a photographer. Anyway, I took thousands of pictures, and they were the most horrible images I had ever taken. And I go back to New York, and I realize that I cannot show them. I realize that I don't want to add to this pornography of violence of these images in the media where they have not done any difference. It is as if no one saw them because no one acted. So that was my logic. You didn't act as if you didn't see them. So I thought, I'm not going to show them. And so I developed, as an architect, a program with these images. And I gave myself an objective, and for 6 years, I developed 25 different projects around the Rwandan genocide. And one of the first one is this one called Real Pictures. And Real Pictures consisted in creating monuments for the people of Rwanda. So I'm going to show the monuments first. So I created monuments with stacks of these boxes. Each one of these boxes contained a photograph. And they tell the story, the text of the image inside that box. And they are in a dark space, so people is invited to come, to walk around, and to read this text without touching and without seeing the images. So I was using a kind of reverse logic. I was thinking, these images were shown to you, but you didn't see them because you didn't react. So perhaps now that I'm not going to show them to you, you will see them better. It's a strange logic, but it's a reverse logic. And I was hoping that people, by reading about these images, would be moved emotionally and would maybe move to act. So those monuments were conceived with that idea behind. So we created, I think, 21 different monuments. And I must say that it's not really that I am hiding them. Apparently, I'm hiding them.
Well, you have to detail more the principle. We see it, but what we see, what we can read, is basically what we usually don't read. In other words, this is a caption. We read the captions, and we're tempted to open the box.
Yes.
You're not expecting people to open the box,
No,
are you?
We don't want them to open the box.
No, but it's possible.
It is possible. I mean...
Is there a picture inside the box?
Yes, absolutely.
But we will never know if there's a picture.
Every box contains an image. So...
One box, one image, one caption.
Yes. So it's really not about hiding them. It is about saving them for a future where our society will be capable of looking at these images and reacting to them. When we will stop being the way we are. At that moment, perhaps these images can be revealed because they will have an effect. And we will become human again. Because our lack of reaction says that we are not human anymore. So let me go back to the... So what's happening here is that all the monuments are gone and they're in institutions. And I had to print a few more extras for each monument because sometimes the text, the seal screen, doesn't come clear. And they were rejected. So the boxes we're showing here are extra from these monuments, and they are being offered individually. But they used to belong to these monuments.
I must say, I live with one of these boxes. And I was at the time working at Magnum Photos, and we saw the pictures coming from the Gilles Perez, the Nartway, all these photographers. But so I've been crying on contact sheets at night, editing the work of these photographers. Still, I have their books, which they made from the time, but I have that box, and there's not one day that I don't look at that box, that I don't address that box. And there's not one day that I don't stop by that box. It's incredibly terrible because I don't know what. I mean, there's an incredible feeling about it. And only one box, even if you don't have the monuments, can create a very violent effect. This is not the only, as you said, there's 25 proposals that you made out of Rwanda. Some are very much using the light, not even a picture inside the box. Pictures sometimes are not there. Can you sort of describe another one of the installations which you made?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't.
That's all right,
them
you describe
here.
it.
Well, perhaps the last one of the Rwanda project is called 6 Seconds. And it's an image of a young girl that I met in a refugee camp. And she was disturbed because she had just witnessed the death of her parents. And I wanted to talk to her. So I approached her, and I start speaking to her, and then she turns around and leaves. So she couldn't speak. And so I had a little camera hanging from my neck, and so very spontaneously I do this and I click to have a souvenir of her. That's all. So later I looked at this picture. It was extremely beautiful. She was from her back with a beautiful dress. You could see her face, and you could see a green landscape behind her. And she was out of focus because I did it very quickly without looking at the camera, and it came out of focus. And for years and years and years, I looked at this picture saying, what a beautiful picture. I cannot use it. It is out of focus. As an architect, to use an image out of focus is inconceivable, unthinkable. And then, in the meantime, in 6 years, I created 25 different around the genocide. And I was about to finish because I was getting sick working on this subject, and I had to stop. This was the year 2000, 6 years after the genocide started. And suddenly, one day, I had an epiphany. And I thought, I'm going to use this image. And perhaps this is the most important image and the most important work from the Rwanda project. Why? Because precisely it is out of focus. Because everything I do as an artist, when I try to communicate to you the reality of someone else, to you, someone that I don't know, is necessarily out of focus. So we, artists or photographers that work with the reality of others and try to convey to you, everything we do is necessarily out of focus. So then I felt okay with using that image. It's in the cover of the book that I will be signing later. So that was the last project from the Rwanda project.
Thank you. We can feel the emotion. But it's not that you were finished with drama. I can see the clocks there on the wall. They're not really more optimistic, are they? It's not just to know where the stock exchange is closing in Wall Street and Tokyo and everywhere. What is it?
I've been commissioned to do some new works for the Hiroshima Museum of Contemporary Art, who has given me a beautiful prize, and I'm going to have a major exhibition there next year. And so this trio of clocks is one of those projects that will be shown in Hiroshima. And so these are 3 clocks, and the first one says 6th of August 1945, 8:15. So the hour and the minutes are fixed. They are blocked, so they are not moving. Only the seconds, the red part is moving. So everything else is blocked. So I wanted to fix a moment in history where the first nuclear bomb fell on Hiroshima. As you know, it was a tragedy of unproportional numbers. It was a criminal act. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed. It was the first time a nuclear bomb was thrown on a population in a city. So I wanted to fix that moment, but I wanted to keep the seconds moving to suggest that we are still alive, but we are kind of zombies. And what's happening today around this issue, this idea that possibly we will start using nuclear arms in Ukraine and in Russia, just doesn't let me sleep. So the world is turning around dangerously after this. And the next one is Nagasaki. As you know, 3 days later, as if the first bomb was not enough, they throw a second bomb in another city at 11:02 p.m. And here again, the time is fixed, but the seconds are moving. Here again, I'm making a reference to another great photographer, or many great Japanese photographers that went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the bombs, and they photographed what they found. And among other things, they found clocks and watches that were blocked at the time of the bomb. So this is making reference to those photographs too. And sadly, as if Japan didn't learn anything with these two tragic experiences, they still use nuclear power. And there was an earthquake on 11th March 2011. And after the earthquakes, there was a tsunami. And with the tsunami, destroyed many things. Thousands of people died. But there was a nuclear reactor in Fukushima that, because of the impact, started leaking toxic water, nuclear toxic water, into the system. And this started at that time, at 2:46 p.m. So I wanted to capture those 3 moments as a kind of warning.
Do we have questions in the audience? Because that would be the moment to come to it. I don't know if there's a microphone somewhere at the back there. Anyone? Yes, we have a question here. If you can just wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to know if for the first project that we showed, the one in Brazil, did you think about the format? Like, I know you had a small camera, 35 millimeter, I would say. If you thought that, if you did that on purpose, or did you not think about it at all? And my second question would be, where do you think the center of the art world is now?
Thank you. No, when I went, my mission was, my objective was to document as much as I could. So I photographed, I recorded, I filmed. As I said, I spent 3 weeks. In fact, I spent a week and a half, and I left. And when I left, I went back to Belén. Belén was the closest city to Serra Pelada. That night, I couldn't sleep, and I became very insecure of what I had done. And because this was analog photography, I couldn't see them. I had the film, but not the images. And I thought, what if the images are terrible? And so the next morning, I decided to go back. So I returned to Serra Pelada and shot again for another week and a half to make sure that I had decent images. So to respond to your question, I had no idea what I was going to do. I came back, and then I gave myself a program how to use these images, and that's when I came up with the idea of the subway station. Your second question, yes, no, definitely New York is not the center of the art world, and it's not in Europe, it's everywhere at the same time. Thanks to this globalized world, thanks to the internet and to the new, let's say, openness that exists in the world towards different cultures, definitely there is not a center. And as an artist, you don't have to leave your city now and move to the capitals to become an artist. And it's a phenomenon that has taken a long time in coming up. But finally, I think we are there. And it's a beautiful thing, but it took a while. In the 80s, when I was starting, an international exhibition meant a few Americans and a few Germans. That was an international exhibition. when I was invited, thanks to the work from Brazil, when I was invited to the Venice Biennale in '86, that was the first time they had invited an artist from Latin America. In '86, first time. Forget about Africa, forget about Asia. Latin America, first time. So it was a really different world. So now things are different. I don't think it's perfect. There's still a very long journey, because we have to reach to the next stage where people from all these different countries reach positions of power in different institutions and change the institution from inside. That will be the next step. But we are on our way.
Well, I have a question about your relationship to emergency, because you said you went to Rwanda very fast. You went to Serra Pelada as you read the news in your newspaper, but you're working for memory, so probably to then build the project that you are developing from that raw material you bring back with you. Takes a lot of time, especially when you do monumental installations like those that we took to Jaar. It's a lot of work. It's very precise. As an architect, you go very much into details. But sometimes there's an emergency to deal with, or are you just about memory? I remember when you sent me the video about the pandemia mismanagement in New York, and you were so desperate, you had at once to produce something and put it online. So how do you deal with emergency? When you feel this is you have to produce very quickly something, or anyway, it's not important, this is just for memory?
Well, I've never created a single work of art that is a pure product of my imagination. Everything I do is a response to a given context, or a given emergency, or a given tragedy. I just don't know how to do anything else. I admire artists or photographers that come up with an image or a project or out of the blue of their imagination, that they face a white screen or a white piece of paper or a white canvas, and they come up with something. I just don't know how to do it. Everything is a response to the context in which I'm working. And of course, we live in very dark times, so we are surrounded by misery, surrounded by tragedies, and I follow quite a few of them, and of course I cannot respond to everything. But sometimes there is something that shocks me to the point that I'm full of rage, and I need to do something about it. And that's when I decide to go and to react. And I first do it for myself, because I cannot take it. I cannot take it. So I do it as a therapy for myself. And then hopefully I manage to control my rage and my pain and transform it and articulate that material into a project. That's what I try to do.
Do we have other questions in the audience? Yes, one here. I don't know where the microphone is coming slowly. There it is.
When you were talking about the project in Spring Street, you mentioned that there were workers taking the subway to Wall Street. So it seems to imply that you were hoping to have some kind of effect with the project you were having there at the time. Today, the gold price is only increased. Today, there's people still mining under the same conditions in places like Mongolia, Burkina Faso, and many places around the world. So I'm wondering whether, first of all, you're disappointed, and secondly, whether you still have a hope for our humanity, and if so, where do you get the hope from? Thank you.
There was a crack in Wall Street in '87. Are you for something in this? Or?
Well, it's a very depressing question, but yes, I'm a very depressing person, and it's hopeless. It's really hopeless. So sometimes I feel that everything we do is futile. But hopefully, I'm always thinking that perhaps I will affect little things here and there. in that sense, I am Gramscian. I follow Antonio Gramsci's ideas. When he said that he's a pessimist with intellect, but optimist with his will. So intellectually, I'm very pessimistic, very pessimistic. But my will is optimistic and hope to make a difference. But it is true that it gets worse and worse. And when I saw the images in the Goodman booth, I had not seen them for 20 years. And I was shocked because, of course, immediately I thought about all these places that you mentioned where things are the same or worse. So it is as if humankind doesn't progress at all. But if I stay with that idea, I would just kill myself. So it's important to be perhaps intellectually pessimist, but optimist with your will. We have no other choice.
You received the Hasselblad Award, which is obviously something that is given away to photographers and not to artists at large, using occasionally or regularly photography. How did you feel about being suddenly included in the, where the photographers are that you often criticize in the way they act vis-a-vis the world?
You know, you do not apply for this grant, this prize. It just happens. And when the Christina Bruckman called me from Sweden, from the foundation, she asked, "Is this Alfredo Jaar?" I said, "Yes. And I want to give you the news of this Hasselblad Award." I said, "Madame, you must be wrong. You must be calling someone else." And she started laughing, and she said, no, we know exactly who you are, and we want to recognize what you have done for photography. I started crying like a baby. Daido Moriyama received the prize before me, so it was, it's absurd, it's ridiculous, it's not logical that first they give it to Moriyama and then give it to me. It's a complete contradiction. So then they gave it to Dayanita Singh, who is a marvelous photographer from India. So then they're back into their normal logic. But I think what they did with me was an accident.
A beautiful accident. Any other questions in the room? Yes, here. Do we have a microphone somewhere? Microphone, down here. Thank you. No, first row.
Thank you so much. Alfredo, Piano Podbielski is my name. I know you have a special affinity to Italy and to Gramsci. Can you just give us a few more thoughts of how that came to develop in your career?
I discovered Gramsci when I studied film in Chile in the 70s. I studied architecture and then I moved into film and I discovered Pasolini. And through Pasolini's writing, I discovered Gramsci. And I started reading Gramsci and reading Pasolini. And I discovered that Gramsci was very important for the Chilean resistance to the dictatorship. So Gramsci played a very important role with his writing in the resistance in Chile during the Pinochet regime. And when I moved out to New York and I started working in Italy, I realized that Gramsci and Pasolini, for me, had become models of thinking. And the way Pasolini acted in the world, he was so many things. He was a writer, a poet, a critic, a polemicist, a filmmaker. And he was so active in the social and political life of Italy. And he became my model. So I simply declare that I'm working in the shadow of Pasolini and Gramsci. And of course, as you know, Gramsci really believed that culture can affect change. So I'm trying to believe also like culture can affect change. So that's why my connection to Gramsci.
Do we have a last question before I do my last question? Yeah, we have one here, right here. Yeah, coming.
Hi, Alfredo. Really enjoy what you had to share. Um, just thinking about the first project that you show and that you said you didn't want to take it out of context. What happens after 40 years that you show these images here? And I understand you genuinely very concerned about, you know, these communities and what it can make in the art world. But there is also another side to it, that what is the social responsibility of an artist when this image become an object that is being exchanged in the art markets? It has a value. And what is your relationship with these communities? And I mean, there is a complexity there that I would like to hear from you. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that? And I think many artists have to deal with this question when they bring reality into this kind of context that we are here living.
I think the question is quite clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Is the answer clear?
I'm asked this question all the time, and I have like 25 different answers because there is no good answer. I think that we create models of thinking the world. And each one of us has a red line that knows what to cross and when to cross it or not to cross it. So that's very important. And in my long career, I've discovered that there is no outside the system. Everything we do is inside the system. It's impossible to avoid. The Dada, the Surrealists, the Fluxus, the performance artists, everyone tried, and then the market just absorbs you. There is no outside the system. So we have to learn how to work within the system. And at the same time, we have to be able to control it. But that's very difficult to do. So I'm always thinking about Blake. Blake said that if you don't want to be enslaved by another man's system, you have to create your own system. So that's what I try to do as an artist. Now, your questions point to something very, very specific. It would be easier for me to ignore certain realities. Okay, I ignore them. So I won't get asked that question. But I think it would be responsible to ignore certain realities. We have to have the courage to talk about them. And that's what we do. And if to talk about them has a price, I'm willing to pay that price because I want to focus on certain realities that most people ignore. When I go to Rwanda, nobody cared about Rwanda. And I wanted to tell people about the Rwandan genocide. So you take risks, you take decisions, because you want to shine a light on certain realities that most people ignore. But this comes with this kind of ethical questions that I'm asking myself all the time. And I've done many works about this ethical thing. It's part of the work. It's part of my being. The Sound of Silence, one of my best-known work, is about that, the ethics of representing someone else. But for me, the answer is not to say, I'm not going to represent you, because in that case, I'm going to be happy and I won't care about this. No, I think we have to confront this reality and do our best. I fail all the time. These works are exercises in representation. I think sometimes some of them are more successful than others, but in general, they all fail. But I keep trying.
Alfredo, you started saying that you position yourself in the art world in New York after studying the environment. I guess that coming from where you were coming from, dictatorship in Chile, you already had on day one an idea that politics, state of the world, will be also having to do with your work. But still, this is what you've clearly said that you decided to embrace. We're now 35 years down the road or something such, 40 years, whatever. Do you feel like day one, this is still your mission? Do you feel that this is something you still have the energy to work on? Or sometimes is it somewhat of a despair that adding to the artist's life, which is already a struggling life, the fact that you carry the weight of the drama of the world on your shoulders is something which is very difficult. I mean, how do you kick yourself in the morning and think you still go on? I mean, where do you stand nowadays with this? I mean,
I think that politics have failed us miserably. I think politicians are totally despicable everywhere. When you look at politicians, and I live in the United States where most politicians have an extraordinary level of corruption, where money is just the blood of politics. You ask yourself, but how is this possible? Well, there are lobbies behind paying these politicians for these things, making these tragedies happening, possible. So politics in general have failed us. So where do we go? We go to culture. Today, the spaces of art and culture are the last remaining spaces of freedom. This is the only place where we can think and we can project ideas, invent new models of thinking the world. It is the only place that's left. And so I want to work within that space. And that's what I do. I create models of thinking the world. Some of them survive, some of them fail. There are exercises in representation, but every single work we do as artists contains a conception of the world. And we have to keep putting them out there in the world, hoping to make a difference. So the world of culture is the only place we have left.
I think this is a beautiful conclusion, and to leave our audience, we're going to run on the screen your last project that you did in Milano. But first, we would like to thank you very much, Alfredo, for taking the time, whatever the noise was, and all the audience who've been with us tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alfredo.